I'm Dream Queen. You're in the cab with me. Thank you so much for rolling and welcoming my guest, Kenneth Wolverton.
Thank you, Jada. Well, that's great. I'm glad you played that song because that was my, in the 60s with the civil rights movement, Odetta, in the mid 60s, late 60s was heard quite often. And I guess it was my coming of consciousness as a white guy.
You got to get that hard H in there. White.
White guy. Well, you take things for granted. You grow up, as a little kid, whatever is going on is what is going on. You don't know what the world is going to do next, And, of course, it was a big transition period back in the 60s, from the 50s where America was, the hero of the world. And of course, Kennedy, when I was in high school, President Kennedy, oh, my heavens, we all believed, finally someone in the White House was going to do something great in the world, the Peace Corps, all of that. And I kept meeting people who were coming back from the Peace Corps and stuff. And they just I thought, wow. They all said, well, they didn't know if they taught anyone anything where they went, but they sure learned a lot, which is, I guess, what inspired me early on to, move on and get out of the small world that I was in. I wanted to see what was going on out there, So, yeah, well, things have changed, like we were talking about. The 60s was certainly an awakening for me. I was a ranch boy. I grew up in Pueblo, Colorado. It was a steel mill town. It was the Pittsburgh of the West, biggest steel mill town west of the Mississippi. So if you know anything about steel mill towns, they're rough towns. They're tough. They're ethnically kind of separated. There's, back then especially, that was before civil rights had taken on any kind of thing. So Pueblo was a pretty tough town. My parents separated when I was 4 years old. So I grew up with my mother, and my dad bought the worst house in the best neighborhood for the family, my brothers and sisters, to move in with my mom in Pueblo. And all around us were doctors and lawyers, and up on the hill, a guy took up, Mr. White had the whole quarter of a block with a wall around his big mansion. But our house was condemned. It was supposed to be torn down, but my father, being the kind of jack of all trades he was, he glued it back together, nice. So to speak. So I grew up, because where I was living, I grew up going to a Thatcher elementary school, which was the best elementary school, basically wealthy. Most of the kids were upper middle class. It was there, and I was one of the few kids that came to school with patches. But because I was an artist, somehow that was quickly, I never really noticed I was poor. As I said, I grew up with brothers and sisters, and we all traded, had whatever we had. So my friends were a mixture of one Jewish kid who was really rich. His father was the managing director of Coors Beer for America. So he had some bucks, but Adi Otterstein, but he wound up being one of my best friends. And then Frankie Castro and Johnny Fuentes, a couple of first-generation Mexican-Americans, were also my best buddies. So Alex Franklin, was a black kid that lived on the wrong side of the track, somehow came over there. I don't know where he came from, but somehow, because I was an artist, I navigated between all those things, all those, kind of cultural clashes that probably existed for a lot of kids. Being an artist was a passport to me at the time. I didn't realize that, I just took it for granted. I could draw, and I loved to draw. Johnny Fuentes he was also an artist. So we always had competitions every day, who could draw the best, It was, it was a good contest. We loved to see, hey, can you draw a dollar bill?
Well, it's so interesting because I'm glad you brought that up. There's this idea that art and beauty can save us.
Absolutely. It saved me. I can testify to that. It was not only a passport to my kind of going through class consciousness, in a way, speaking, or, bigotry consciousness in a way early on that I didn't realize I was doing that. It was a passport. But as I got older, I realized it was giving me, an advantage just to do what I want. I coasted through high school not paying attention to anything because the teacher said, "Oh, let Kenny go on. He's an artist. He'll make it somehow." I think I slept through my entire senior year of high school. And I remember one time I had a job at Trailways bus station as a baggage boy. And I got out of school and went right to Trailways, and I'd work till maybe midnight or 1 or 2 in the morning, depending on the late buses and stuff. So when I get to school in the morning, I was like conked out, So and especially afternoon, I was just like, I remember I had Mr. Reed was my English teacher, is my last class. And I remember one day I woke up on the desk, oh, it's really quiet. And I looked up and I saw the clock, went, 5 o'clock. How? What?
And they just let you sleep?
Mr. Reed, when the bell rang, I didn't budge. And he said, my classmate said, Mr. Reed put his finger up his lips and said, "Everyone be really quiet. Let Mr. Wolverton sleep soundly. Know he works hard, and we want him to get his rest." And he told the janitors just to leave me alone to see what would happen. And finally, I guess it was when the janitors came in the room at 5 o'clock and woke me up. And wow,
Were you late for work?
Yeah, I was late. It's like, fortunately, I can't remember, but I was like, scrambled to work. But anyway, that for me was like a realization that being an artist was, somehow a blessing, And then, of course, as I got older, I've gone all over the world, as an artist doing things. And I realized that with language especially, I've worked of course, I went to Germany when I was in the Army, and I wanted to be a battalion artist in the Army, which helped me greatly in the Army during Vietnam, the time of Vietnam.
I want to talk a little bit about that, or listen a little bit about that. So what is a battalion artist?
Well, a battalion is 1,000 soldiers. It's made up of 4 companies. And there's a headquarters for every battalion. And so, which I was in first company of battalion, 1st and 4th. Anyway, I was in the main company in the battalion headquarters. And the colonel needed an artist to make maps. We had war games and things on, so that when he was directing his officers and things, we'd go out to Hohenfels in eastern Germany. I'd build these big 3-dimensional all-terrain maps, real relief maps with topography and all of that, showing the fields and things, and color them and paint them and illustrate different things. So that was the main thing I did for the Army. Once in a while he said, "Do you know how to paint lines?" And I said, "Yeah." "Can you put a red line between the gray and the green in my office?" So, which I had to do that in boot camp as well. I was called out one day. It was Sergeant Gomez said, "We got any artists? We need a volunteer." And no one raised their hand because they used to the jokes that the sergeants would play if they volunteered. You don't volunteer for anything, Anyway, my hand just popped up automatically without even thinking. And everyone goes, "Oh, Wolverton, you're going to die. You're going to die." So Sergeant Gomez says, "All right, Wolverton, you go to the orderly room." He said, "Rest of you, you're going on a 5-mile hike." In the rain and cold. So I went into the orderly room, and that's what he asked me. He said, "I want you to paint a red line. Can you do lines?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "All right, I want you to paint a red line around my office." So I was in there all day with Sergeant Gomez, who'd been to Vietnam 2 or 3 times. He was a first sergeant, E8. And I asked him, I said, "Sergeant Gomez, why are the Viet Cong, why are they fighting us?" He said, "Oh, they're just stupid gooks. They just do what they're told to do." I looked at him, "That's funny. I thought that's what we were doing."
Did you say that?
No.
Oh, yeah, I was about to say.
No.
You got buried in the rain after that.
No. I saw them all go running off in the rain, and so I stayed in there all day. But
What year did you go in, and how did you get in?
Well, I was in my 4th year of college in Portland, Oregon, Portland State College then. And long story, but I went to sleep on the day of our finals. And I went in at 9 o'clock in the morning to study, and I sat down, and I must have just gone to sleep because I woke up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I looked down at my books that I was going to look at and cram and see if I could guess anything, And, well, I guess that's over. I flunked everything.
Oh, no.
And also it was the rotary system, the lottery system, that is, for draft at the time. And at that point, if you dropped out of the university, you had about 30 days notice before you were drafted. So I thought, oh God, what have I done? What have I done? So the Army at that time said, well, if you joined, you could join for 3 years and you could choose your profession. So anyway, an Army recruiter talked me into it. I joined. He lied to me. I was going to be a dental assistant. He signed me up as a combat medic, which is the only reason I joined the Army, is because I thought, no way I want to go be in the infantry. No way. And the worst occupation of all would be a combat medic. I'm not good with blood, one way or the other. And also at that time, the reports were coming back. Second lieutenants and medics were usually the first ones knocked off on any firefight, because I asked my first sergeant once I was in boot camp. I said, why do they shoot medics? And he said, well, because it demoralizes the blankety-blank out of the troops. It demoralizes. Your doctor's dead. No one wants to go out and get shot, So anyway, I that's why I wound up being sent to Germany. Out of 305 in my combat medic school, 300 went to Vietnam. 5 of us got sent to Europe.
You're a lucky guy.
Tell me.
Wow.
Tell me, yeah. So anyway, that's when I got out of the Army, I decided, well, I was never going to get a job again. I wanted to be an artist. I made up my mind just to do that. So at the age of 23, 24, I basically, from that point on, I've done nothing but one way or the other. Not always, fine art, not always great stuff, painting signs, carving signs, whatever it took, creatively to do. And I guess one of my first real ideas or community ideas that art was a passport was I bicycled with a friend down in Mexico when we were 20, and I had a game that an artist had come to our school and showed us how he could predict the future. He'd ask someone's name, and if say your name was Tom, he'd put, all right, how do you spell that? T-O-M, and would do a big T, and he'd do a big O, and he'd do an M, and then magically he would do a really funny face out of it. And all the kids, this was an elementary school, I guess we all laugh and laugh. So when we went to Mexico, I didn't speak any Spanish at all. I finally learned to say, "Cómo se llama?" What's your name? And then I have them show me how they spelled their name, and I would do the same little name game with these Mexican kids. And suddenly I would have 10 or 20 little kids around. Me next. And I realized, wow, it was so cool that and because of that, we'd get invited to people's houses and all kinds of things. So early on, I realized, wow, art has a magic element about it. Even when you can't, communicate verbally with someone, if you can show in front of them, how to just make something out of nothing, it was like a passport to their own domain, So I guess that was my first kind of community arts experience. And then over the years, I wound up painting murals in businesses and things. And then at the age of 28, I decided to go back to Europe, really, not in the Army, see what it was like. So I wound up going to Scotland. And really a long story, but I wound up meeting a lot of people. And I wound up working with a theater company called Theater Workshop Edinburgh, and became the artist in residence there, which my job was basically go out to the ghettos and see what I could do with the kids. So they sent me to actually the poorest ghetto in Britain at the time, Pilton. There was 2 ghettos in Edinburgh. Pilton was one, and Craig Miller was another. There was several of them, but they were the 2 big ones. They had over 40,000 people that lived in these absolutely just unreal tenements, welfare state buildings that had all flat roofs, that all leaked, that all had rising damp. Violence, alcoholism, drug addiction, brutality, abuse, everything you think of went on there. So I went out to Pilton and wound up working with a bunch of ragtag little poor kids, all little white Scottish kids, or toughest little goats you've ever met in your whole life. But early on, they asked me where I was from, and I said I was growing up in Colorado and Oregon. They asked me if I was a cowboy. I said, well, I grew up on the ranch. So from that day on, they called me cowboy. Cowboy, what we're going to do today? Cowboy, what we're doing now? So for 3 years, that's what I worked with. Basically about 20 little kids that came every day. I went out there.
I used to listen to your show, Techno Sadhu, every once in a while, and you were on like 3 hours.
2 hours.
It's
a long time. Yeah.
No, but I mean, it would listen. I would listen to it, and it sounded like Hunter Thompson. I felt like I was on an acid trip when I would listen to your show, and I think you had like some music that was going on in the background. And there were these stories that I just couldn't tell if they were true or not.
Oh, wow.
Were they all true? Like your life is like a piece of art. I mean, it was like looking at a painting in my mind. I'd be in the workshop over here. I was building this giant fence around this house on Back Road, and I would just listen to your show in the shop, and I'm like, man, that guy, I'm not sure what I'm listening to right now.
Oh, that's really funny. Well, one of the reasons I wanted in radio, there used to be on NPR every Sunday, Joe Frank Hour, and just the greatest of theater of the absurd, audio theater every Sunday. I was like church for me to listen to Joe Frank, because he was coming out of Santa Monica at the time. And he had a team that he worked with. And that was the exact thing that you never knew about him. Well, 2 things. One, he always had short stories that were laced together with this journey-like music, which would drift you from one story into another. And then the music would sometimes be in the background through his stories. But it was the music that was like a train you're on. And then his stories... That was exactly it. I never knew whether it was real or these were complete baloney, because it was like man in the street or women in the street interviews, these different characters, or sometimes there'd be 2 or 3 people in dialogue or a situation going on. And I thought, wow, that is good, because I grew up with radio in the late 40s and the early 50s, Inner Sanctum, Superman, FBI, all these shows. And radio back then, I mean, that was the entertainment before television. Television came to only in America in the early 50s, So as a little kid, I used to listen to it, and it was like I could imagine it all. And I realized at that point, or later on, I guess, that radio allows the imagination to illuminate whatever you want, depending on who does it and how they do it, right? And so when Joe Frank came along, it was the first time I heard radio that allowed my imagination just to, like a theater. I was there with him through the whole thing. So, and in high school, actually, a friend and I used to do tape recordings, and we invented a fake radio station, KORN, Corn. And it was based out. We got inspired because there was a radio station that we used to listen to. In San Francisco, forgotten their names. Anyway, 2 guys used to go down Union Square in San Francisco and interview people. And it was hilarious because you never knew if they were real people they were talking to, these lunatics running around in San Francisco in the early 60s. It was just coil and sharp. Sharp, yeah, Coyle and Sharp are their names. I don't even know if that was their real names, but that was the thing. And so my friend and I would make up these crazy stories. We were totally inspired by Coyle and Sharp and this thing. So and then when I went to Scotland, working with Theatre Workshop in Edinburgh, we actually got involved with the commercial radio station. And BBC was basically non-commercial, and there was. When I got there, shortly after I got there, they allowed commercial radio stations to finally start operating in Britain. So we did a children's show that went on for about 6 weeks, I guess, which I wrote along with several other people. And our theater company, it was 5 of us that performed all the skits. It was Adventures of Hokum and Pokum. 2 little brats that go off, and it was like 80 days around the world, balloon kind of thing, you know. So that was my first experiences with radio. So when I came here to Cerrillos in Madrid back in 86, early on, people were talking, well, we should get a radio station together. And Frank, a guy who lived here, actually had an underground radio station going for a while before FCC nailed him and shut him down. And anyway, it was talk for several years before Stella arrived. And then it seemed like, wow, this is going to go somewhere. So when it finally happened, I was one of the first, yes, I want to do it. And really, Joe Frank was my total... The only reason I wanted to do is I wanted to emulate Joe Frank and do something. And if anyone ever said that, you know, that was even 1/10 of what Joe Frank was, I would go, wow, I did it, you know. And
well, you did it. If that's if the journey of sound and story was what you were aiming for, you nailed it.
Oh, thank you. Well, it was funny when I did the mural here. In all the years, 10 years that I was on the radio, I mentioned Joe Frank once in a while, but no one ever mentioned Joe Frank to me, or no one ever said that, what you just did to me. I mean, we'd talk about my shows and things, and, you know, occasionally, especially Sinatra Chris, Rattlesnake Chris.
Yeah,
he was one
names.
of my only religious, you know, customers that he was always, you know, relate back to me. Anyway, when I was doing the mural, and it was my last show, just before I did the mural, someone arrived from Albuquerque, this young guy from Albuquerque, he's about your age, I guess, and...
How old do you think that is?
What, your late 20s?
Just leave it there.
early 30s?
Sure, yeah.
Are you?
No, are you kidding? I'm 48.
You're joking. Oh my gosh. Well, you're doing well.
Oh, thank you.
You're going to last a while.
They say witches don't age.
Well, how about that? Well, you're looking good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyways, this guy, he says, are you Ken Wolverton? I said, yeah. I said, oh my God. He said, you know what? He said, I turned on KMRD by accident one day. It came up and I heard your voice and I started listening. I thought, wow, someone's done it. Joe Frank is back. And I looked at him and said, are you joking? He said, no. He said, when Joe Frank went off the air, I was just so disappointed. Why doesn't someone come back on the radio that did what he said, I listened to him for years. I said, I love Joe Frank. He said, I've been listening to your show ever since I first discovered it. He said, God, you're just like Joe Frank. I just fell over. I was I had shivers running over. I go, I don't believe it. 10 years, and this first time anyone even said I wouldn't say I was Joe Frank. No way. But you know, that for me was a gratification, I guess. You know, that I at least repeated something. You know, not copying, but how the journey of it. It was the journey that he took people on. Your mind, you were with him. No matter what the story was about, you just went with it. And it was like, you know, a roller coaster of different things and so forth. And you asked me about the Techno Sadhu.
Yeah, how'd you get that?
A sadhu, you know what a sadhu is?
Yes, tell the people.
He's a holy person in India. A sadhu, when you become a sadhu, when a man, or mainly men in India, when they've done everything they needed to do, they had their family, they paid for their wife, the house is done, They've completed all their tasks as a responsible,
they call him a householder.
Yeah, supporter. He goes to his wife and he says, "Wife, I am now on Sadhu." And she says, "Bless you, husband," and kisses him on the head. He takes off all his clothes, puts on a woolen blanket. She gives him a wooden bowl, and he walks out into the street and wanders off and becomes one of those strange holy men that wander around India that do nothing but be holy.
And this is mainly Hindu, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a spiritual quest, in other words. So for me to come on radio really essentially was a spiritual quest, but I was a Techno Sadhu because I wasn't quite willing to take off all my clothes and wander out in the street with a wooden bowl. I still like my little car and keep my clothes on and shoes and so forth. But that's why the duplicity of being a Techno Sadhu. I'm still on a spiritual quest, and so that was part of the whole journey of being on the radio, was trying to find not my personal stories, my own experiences, but to relate stories that other people had written, or about mostly topical subjects, political things, of woke things, us liberal crazy people, human stories, and music. I played music occasionally, but just as far as putting on a music, it was minimal. I tried mostly I spent a half an hour usually with my own material that I'd written. Some of it was fictional, some of it was autobiographical, or read stories that I was inspired by, or read things from people that had written, some known, some unknown, that felt really worth repeating, over the air. So that was my, I guess, quest as being a talk jockey, a TJ, not a DJ, is to try to repeat words of wisdom that I feel need to be repeated, as often as we can, and to dignify people I felt that really were struggling to deal with what's going on at the moment. For instance, like we were talking about AI at the moment, or the whole political world. I can't believe being the Vietnam era, of joining the army, of Nixon, of the assassination of Martin Luther King, of Robert Kennedy, JFK, all of that happening in my 18 to 24 years old. It's just like all the artists, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Doors. On and on. The landscape of the world was just so screwed up back in the 60s. And Nixon, what's his name? The Democrat before him, Johnson, wasn't very good at dealing with the war either, but civil rights, he managed to get that one going, So that was his one blessing as a Democrat. He really opened up the doors to civil rights. And we're all thankful for that, Nixon did some things, and at the time he was a villain, but compared to the one we have now, I would gladly welcome Nixon back. Oh, please come back, Nixon. Please come back. Do something,
I just had a connection in my mind. Have you ever seen the show Futurama?
No.
Oh, it's by Matt Groening, who did The Simpsons. But in the show Futurama, Guy Fry falls into a cryogenic chamber in 1999, and he's woken up, I believe, 1,000 years later in 2099 or something like that. The year's something like that. But Nixon is back as president, and his head is in a glass jar of fluid, and he's got a mechanical body that they call Agnew. So they've kind of like merged him, and so they have a lot of historical figures. It came out in the late 90s. And so they have historical figures from the 60s and 70s and 80s, and they are all exist in like the year 2100 as heads floating in fluid. And just when you said that, it just made another Simpsons predicted it connection that when we're begging Nixon back, because I'm like, how does Nixon get to be president again in 2100? And I'm like, because we've been through some stuff and we'll take anybody over this guy.
Anybody.
But
really.
I mean, honestly, on the serious tip, did you ever think that you could see America go this far backwards?
No, not at all. I mean, we all realized it was an absolute tragedy in Vietnam. You know, it was a war crime. It was an absolute war crime, and I didn't realize that, unfortunately, until I joined the army. Too late. I was in the army, you know. But no, I mean, that was and Nixon was just a disgrace, and it didn't get a whole lot better after him, you know. And then I actually left while Nixon was still president. I left America. I thought I was sick of it. I thought, that's it. I'm quitting. I'm leaving America. And I went to Scotland. I didn't actually think I was going to be there forever, but I thought, I'm getting out of here. As it turned out, I was gone 14 years, wow. You know, in Europe. And I came back once in 14 years. So no, I didn't think ever it would descend to what I should have known in 2016 when Trump was elected the first time. Something was wrong because, you know, I mean, no one liked him in New York. I mean, I saw that first time I was in New York, and on my way to Europe in '73, I heard people talking about Trump, what a, you know, SOB, blah 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 blah, you know, and everyone hated him in New York at that point, you know, and so him coming back is just, well, he's worse. He's worse. It's a Nazi. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. He's a fascist. He wants to change America for his own benefit. He's a Caligula.
Yeah.
Louis XIV. Yeah. Whatever you want to call him. He's one of Napoleon gone rascal, you know.
I have a couple of questions regarding the juxtaposition of the two wars, or the endless wars that the United States has been involved in, you know, for the past, I don't know, it seems like we got a taste of it in World War II and just never put it down.
Yeah.
Having wars on other people's soil, at least, you know. And I obviously wasn't here during the Vietnam War, but did you see much of the corporate interest that was involved in, like, say, we're bringing democracy to the Viet Cong, we're bringing democracy to the Middle East, we're bringing democracy, but really it's, you look up and there's McDonald's, there's oil fields, there's, you know, people being, like, the wars happen and then we put a bunch of shops and businesses in. Mm-hmm. You know, were you able to see that?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, once I was in the army, it became well, you know, Nixon called it the domino theory. You know, if one state falls on this, you know, like the image, the metaphor of a row of dominoes, you tip one over, they all fall over, right? So if Vietnam fell, the rest of the world is going to become communist. You know, well, it was going back to McCarthyism, which, when I was a little kid, I was aware of that going on in the 50s when communism was absolutely a terror thing. It was like, you know, Frankenstein was going to come to America and take everything over. So, yeah, and also, I mean, even at the time, I think once I got in the Army, Eisenhower, you know, when he was president, he warned of the military-industrial complex. Seriously.
Yeah, I just saw something on that the other day.
Yeah, seriously. And I remember maybe in high school or something kind of hearing about it, but it didn't make any sense to my life. I was a little kid, you know, I wanted to get a car, drive around, eat hamburgers and smoke cigarettes, you know, and chase girls. That was
you nailed it though. That's capitalism in the world. Like, hey, everybody, come on, have a Coke, have a burger, get some ladies, drive this car.
Yeah, well, we just take our wealth for granted. I mean, you grow, even the poor in America has nothing to do. If you go to when I was in Iran or in Mexico, the things you see there of poverty, with Gaza, you know. I mean, I never saw anything quite like Gaza, but I certainly saw human degradation and people left to die out in the street. people just stepping over people that were ill, little kids being held by their fathers in front of a pharmacy begging for money so he could get some medicine for his little kid. I never saw that in America. Have you?
No.
I mean, I've been in worse ghettos. I went through 37 states at one point doing artists, performance art in schools. So I went to 400 schools in 2 years. And I went to every capital of all 37 states. Every capital I went into was a ghetto in the middle of it. Usually housed by people of color, of course, that owned nothing. All, slum landlords. And didn't matter what state it was in. Des Moines, Minneapolis, St. Louis, Cincinnati, whatever big city you're in, you go to the center of the cities, slums. But slums with cars, big cars sitting out in front. Slums with television antennas and people with electricity. People eating, in fast food restaurants, A lot of fat people walking around. Didn't see any people like emaciated, falling down out of hunger in the ghettos. It opened my eyes that, America has a equity problem. The rich, the very rich, and the very, very poor that no one cares about at all. Mainly people of color, It was also a revelation of driving through 37 states, all the farmlands of the Midwest. Everywhere in these little towns and farmlands in Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska, Texas, no matter where I went, I saw nothing but white people owning the land. I thought, wow. And I being a white person, I grew up with my family having land. I just thought, that was normal. But it never occurred to me how completely unnormal it is for a lot of people, So, the whole industrial military complex, the corporate, look at the cities. It's nothing, even Santa Fe, Cerrillos Road, is nothing but corporate enterprises. The mom and pop old restaurants that I grew up with in late 40s, early 50s that we used to go and eat in, even when I was traveling around through 37 states in the mid-90s, once in a while I would come across a mom and pop restaurant in one of these towns, but by and large, it was McDonald's, Taco Bell, corporate world, and it's slow. It's like cataracts. When you have cataracts, they come on so slowly over the years. You don't realize that colors aren't actually brown. Everything gets like you're more and more wearing shaded sunglasses, and you get used to everything looking like that because you don't realize it's changed. And when I finally had my cataract operation about 5 years ago, I went, wow, everything's Technicolor. I mean, people told me that, but I didn't realize how absolutely, blind color-wise I had become. And that's in a way that's a metaphor about the corporate world. It's crept on so slowly since World War II. Slowly. Now it's farms and ranches are being gobbled up by the corporate worlds. Most little farms or ranches like my brother's. My brother Tommy still is ranching. He's 85. And at one point he had, his wife was, her father was an Italian first generation. I came to America, or grandfather is, and back in the early with the Italian immigration that came around the turn of the century, the 20th century. He was one of those people that came, and at that point they had 160 acres. People could get if they worked it and they made it better. It was theirs over a number of years.
Just giving away land.
Yeah, they gave away. So my sister-in-law's grandfather came to Eastern Oregon and got 160 acres, and he had to walk 20 miles a day to building a dam in Prineville to make money, and he would go back and work on the farm. And over the years, he finally got the land all worked, and had raising cattle. And then he bought more land. Bought more land. So when my brother married Beverly, her father finally had like 16,000 acres of the whole valley. And then they wound up, my brother and Beverly wound up getting 10,000 more acres of BLM land that they used for. But they at one point they had nearly 1,000 head of cattle, which sounds like a lot, and they were doing okay. But even farms now that have 1,000 head of cattle can barely make it because the corporate world is buying all kinds of small farms and ranches and taking over, taking them over, and it's just like it's a mass takeover of land, and that's happening. So it's it's a very difficult time in so many ways, and my granddaughter is just 14. My daughter is your age; she's 48, and I wonder about what is your world. I'm 80. What is going to be your world if you manage to live to my age, and it's very difficult looking. I wouldn't say it's hopeless, because I think there's a few heroes still. Cory Booker, is that his name, from New Jersey? I saw a video of him yesterday. Like, wow, finally, some Democrat is finally condemning Democrats for getting their heads out of their rear ends, getting up and doing something, Why the whole Senate doesn't just jump up and start stamping their feet when these lunatics on the right are doing what they're doing is, it's being too civil. I guess that's a problem of democracy in one sense, that it allows too much freedom for everybody's head to go in too many directions. Unlike fascism, everyone has to agree with the head serpent, right? Which is what I think the Republican Party has come to. It's one serpent monster that's basically got them all in agreement. So that makes them unbelievably powerful.
So you circled it right back around to why I asked about the corporate interest in war. You were talking about Trump right before I asked that question, and it's easy for us to point at that one head of the Hydra, but I believe that it's big business and corporations that are really the head of the snake is the money. It's the dollar bill, and or the gold bar or the Bitcoin or whatever you want to call it now. And so, and also I think the fear of violence is what a lot of these senators are responding to, the judges and things, not necessarily violence of the people, but, you got a mafia hitman in charge right now, and people who are not afraid to threaten folks. First, he's going to say, they're going to say, we'll take away your funding if you don't support this, or, they start with the PAC bribes, the political money. And then if that doesn't work, then they'll bribe you with other sort of deals. And then if that doesn't work, they're threatening your family. And then they can point a camera back to the 60s and say, bye-bye, Bobby, bye-bye, Johnny, bye-bye, Martin. Like all of these, Malcolm, all of these folks who spoke sense got offed. And now what do you, real quick, what do you think is going on with Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? What do you think his father would say?
I think he's mentally unbalanced, and that's very agreeable to the trumpet. Quite frankly. It's amazing. A man that came from the family he came from is damaged in such a way. There's something wrong with the guy. Very much. And that's, I don't. Other than that, I have not a clue. I don't think he's power hungry. I think he actually believes what he's saying. About so many things, which he's basically saying science doesn't make sense. So if you agree with that, then something's wrong with me, a lot of science is maybe too much science, yes, science should be common sense somewhere along some things, but, science has a kind of a test pattern that they test things on, to see if it works or it doesn't work. So, generally, I'm in agreement for most part with, science, and especially when that came up with the vaccination. The anti-vaxxer business was just like denying that 30 million people died around the world, and it just like nothing flat in a time of 1 year, 30 million people. There's COVID is nonsense. It's So yeah, I'm at a loss other than saying, pity his soul.
Yeah. Beautiful mural outside that you facilitated.
Thank you.
For the community on the KMRD.
Well, that was the help of about 50 people.
It's beautiful. You just welcomed them all in and gave them paintbrushes and inspiration.
Yeah. Well, I basically, it's short with it. I call that freedom within boundaries.
Yeah.
Because basically, I designed the whole thing with Stella. She chose the design that I gave, and I outlined it, and it was a coloring book. So I gave people certain areas that was within a line or a figure or something. I said, okay, I controlled it by saying, you have these colors to use.
Yeah.
No, you can't have black there. No, you can't have brown there. No, this. It was working on the rainbow. If you look at the whole thing, it's all rainbow coordinated. These dancing figures in particular, it goes from purple to magenta, to red, to orange, to yellow, to green, to blue, which is LGBT, I guess.
Don't say it. They'll make us paint over.
Rainbow Coalition.
That's it. Ken, thank you so much for joining me. It's been such a pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Jada. Thank you very much. It's been a big switch for me, being I was the one that always talking to people for the last 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to have you back on. There's still some stories that you were supposed to tell me that we just haven't even gotten to. I love you so much.
Thank you, Jada. All right, bye-bye.
In the Cab Radio is produced by Jada White, a.k.a. Dream Queen. Original theme music produced by Baby Weekend Boys and Icky Mac the Beat Jugular. Learn more at In the Cab Radio at Linktree. Thank you so much for tuning in.